can call for him.
Señor,
347-347. Say more. I can contact your family. The guy says, I don't remember. And he's pushed into the elevator.
Okay, buena suerte, señor. Bye con Dios.
What just happened?
ICE picked him up.
They've been waiting there all day. They know who they're coming to get.
Yeah, there was an ICE officer in the courtroom the entire time, texting and coordinating.
And just to be clear, these are people showing up at court. The government told them to. They're following the rules as part of this legal process, and then they are suddenly getting arrested in the hallway and thrown into detention.
Yeah. And we're doing so many of them here, it can feel almost routine, like between the detentions. The agents and the press and the lawyers are just standing around chit-chatting about the podcast they listen to or Lord of the Rings. And then something happens that almost reminds everyone of what we're doing here, no matter how many times we see it. It's one person's life turning completely upside down. Like this one guy. His name was Luis from Venezuela. He was around 50 years old. He'd actually entered the country legally at a port of entry. He broke no law. He was detained in the hallway, pulled into the elevator. His sister was with him, trying to follow him in. The doors closed in her face. She started jumping up and down. Everyone just stood there. The agents hunched over. They seemed miserable. Some looked down at their shoes. The sister, Anila, eventually tracked him down in New Jersey. He's still in detention there now.
And were the judges in on this? Like they're having these cases and then people are leaving their courtrooms and being taken away in the hallway.
We didn't know. But by the end of the summer, it didn't seem to matter what happened in the courtroom, what ruling the judges made. The agents were picking up whoever they wanted. And so we were like, what's going on with these judges? We really wanted to talk to them, but none of them would talk to us.
Well, at first.
At first. But that changed. Because what was happening in the hallways was just part of this dismantling of the immigration court. There was all sorts of stuff happening on the inside, really in the guts of the place, that we could not see, that we didn't even know was there. And then suddenly, the judges started talking
and saying some stuff that is totally eye-opening, and that is going to be our show today. Today, we're going to hear from people who we normally never hear from, immigration judges, the people who are supposed to make the decisions about who stays and who goes in our country, and they are saying now that that is becoming very hard to do in a fair way because of the way their jobs have changed in the last few months. Some of them are being told straight up what their decision should be. Today, they take us behind the curtain at the court, the robes come off, the judges get real. They talk about stuff that I have never heard was happening at all. To hear for yourself, stay with us.
Running late in the morning? It happens. You can still start your day feeling pulled together. Listen to Morning Edition from NPR News every weekday.
I'm Norma Martinez. Join us from 4 to 9 a.m. here on Texas Public Radio.
TPR thanks the following business members for their financial support. Cappuccino's, one of the Lawton family of restaurants. Goodwill San Antonio. The law offices of Stacy E. Goodbread, practicing family law in New Braunfels. And Dr. Bassem Maslow, gastroenterologist. Learn about the business membership program at tpr.org.
This American life. So like I was saying before the break, for months, no judge would talk to us. Then this summer, they started talking because of what they're seeing behind the scenes at immigration court. Nadia Raymond talked to them. Here she is.
It takes a very specific person to be an immigration judge. The kind that likes minutia, likes listening to hours of translations from like quiche to Spanish to English just to get someone to confirm their mailing address. And obviously, you have to believe in rules. One main rule they have, don't talk to the press. I ended up talking to 15 judges from all over the country. Desperate times, I guess. George Pappas was one of them. He works at a court in Chelmsford, Massachusetts, close to Boston. A pretty new judge. He's been on the bench about 2 years. An average day for him until recently was usually one of two kinds of hearings. Either a lot of quick, repetitive, boring hearings just to schedule the next hearing, or a full asylum case.
There were some cases that I could not grant, so I'll go through those, okay? Let me go through those first.
In those asylum hearings, a person would have to make the case that they cannot live anywhere in their home country because they're being persecuted due to their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or the ever so squishy membership in a particular social group.
I've seen a lot of cases out of Brazil where the immigrant is saying, I'm being persecuted, and I fear for my life because the loan shark that I borrowed money from is after me. I haven't paid back the loan, and he's looking to kill me. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen that claim walk into my courtroom, and I'm just shaking my head. Why is this here?
Rough going, but being chased by a loan shark doesn't make you a member of a particular social group. So you can't get asylum. Pretty clear cut. George denied those cases. Kira Lillian, a judge from another court on the other side of the country, Concord, in the Bay Area. She also approaches her cases with a healthy level of skepticism, a discerning ear. Because, that's what she's supposed to do. And some people lie.
That is something that always happens, is that you do hear certain stories repeatedly and certain key details that are repeated and like hundreds of times over. And so you're just immediately thinking, how can that possibly be the case? But
right, like they make you go like side-eyed a little. Like you're like, is that true?
Yeah. I never felt angry about it. In my mind, there are two big reasons why you could hear the same claim from someone over and over again. One is because it's manufactured and been farmed out to a whole bunch of people, and they're all given the same fake story. The other is because there's a pattern and practice of human rights violations in that country.
Right.
And that's why everybody is giving the same story, because everybody's undergoing the same harm and persecution. So, that's the challenge.
So that's the job. Hearings. And the people appearing in these hearings in Kira's court day after day broke down like this. People who wanted to stay in the U.S., their lawyers, if they had one, interpreters, and Department of Homeland Security lawyers. And no matter what horror story from what corner of the world she hears from the bench, she keeps things calm and orderly. Which is why it was so shocking when ICE showed up at her courthouse this summer, and she could hear the chaos right outside her courtroom.
I knew people were passing out. I knew we had to call an ambulance for someone whose husband was detained. ICE officers were hiding in the stairwell. I could see protesters outside of my window standing in front of the ICE transport vans and trying to block them. I could see the scuffle. I could hear the drums and the honking. And I would go into court thinking everything could just explode. And I have to hold it.
All the judges they talked to said they were on edge about ICE now being inside the building, just outside their doors in the hall. This was a huge change. And at the same time, things inside their courtrooms began to change too. Jennifer Durkin is a judge at a courthouse on Varick Street in Manhattan. Right around the time I showed up in New York, a DHS lawyer, a lawyer from the Department of Homeland Security, showed up for court. They're the side that represents the government, usually arguing to deport someone. Two things were unusual that day. First, DHS lawyers usually appear via video for this kind of routine hearing. This guy came in person. And second, he filed a motion to dismiss the case. In fact, he said to her,
I'm going to be making a number of motions to dismiss. It's like, what's happening? And
so that immediately sounded weird to you?
Yeah.
Why?
And because typically, motions to dismiss would mean that they're no longer pursuing a prosecution of the person.
Okay.
Which almost never happens. And ICE was outside. There's a series of strange motions being made. They're coming in person. It was clear that something was up.
What was up was, instead of arguing why a person should be deported, the government was like, We don't want to do that anymore. Instead, we want to dismiss the case. Which, if you're the immigrant sitting there, can sound good. Like, great, I'm free. But the problem is you didn't win your asylum case. Your case was dismissed. And the fact that you had a pending asylum case was the only reason you could stay in the country. Suddenly, with no pending case, you have no grounds to be here. And you're standing just a few feet away from ICE, who are ready to detain you. And the judges understood that better than the people in front of them. They were like, how can we just close this case? For what legal reason? It looked like a way to just trap people and detain them. The judges didn't know how to respond. So some of them called their supervisors, who were also judges, known as ACIJs, Assistant Chief Immigration Judges. Jennifer Payton, she goes by Jenna, is an ACIJ in Chicago, supervising 22 judges, has been a judge for nearly a decade. She was about to board a flight when her phone rang.
One of my judges called my cell phone, and he's like, they're moving to dismiss in court. I said, like, adjudicate the case in front of you, adjudicate the motion as you would any other motion. Mm-hmm. That's it. Like any other motion, Judge, adjudicate this like any other motion you've received.
In other words, keep being a judge. Follow the rules and make your judgment. It seems simple to her. Even if the government is asking for something weird, do your job like normal. In this situation, the practice is, when one side moves to dismiss, you don't have to say yes right away. You can give the other side 10 days to think about it. But then, about a week after that, immigration judges got an email from the Executive Office of Immigration Review, EOIR, their bosses who work for the Trump administration. It was about the motions to dismiss. And it said, you don't need to give immigrants 10 days to respond. You may grant the motions that DHS is asking for on the spot. Most of the judges I talked to read this as instructing them to grant all the motions to dismiss, to side with Homeland Security. Even though the email used the word may, judges heard it as shall.
And that was what was concerning, that we were being told how to adjudicate motions to dismiss.
But just to say, I mean, those are your bosses. Like, doesn't it make sense that your bosses would be like, this is what we need you to do?
So, as a supervisor, I never told my judges how to decide a case. Mm-hmm. And that is the hallmark of being an independent judge. You are resolving issues in controversy using your training and your expertise and your knowledge of the immigration laws. And I'm not going to tell you how to decide a case. Mm-hmm. And this was telling me how to decide a case. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was what was very troubling.
George went to his supervisor, another judge, immediately when this all went down.
And I said, Judge, we're hearing that attorneys for the department are now coming into court, and they're asking to dismiss cases. Respondents are being arrested and put into expedited removal. Is there anything you want to tell us in terms of how you want to approach this new environment? And his response was, grant them. Grant them. And I looked at him. This was a Teams video. And I looked at him and I said, you said grant them? He goes, yeah. You mean rubber stamp, grant them? When I said rubber stamped, he hedged a little bit. He goes, well, if they're defective. So unless they're defective, you want us to grant them? Yes. The message was clear. Don't cause any trouble. Grant them.
Some judges did just grant the motions. But George wanted to consider each request and rule according to each specific case. He didn't want to rubber stamp anything. So he looked up case law about how to deny these dismissals legally. And then he decided to share this info and kind of stick it to his boss.
And I made sure that law was posted on Teams where he could see that. But it was my way of saying, no, this is the way we're going to do it. Because I would put it out there and say, folks, just so you know, here's the law on motions to dismiss. If you need to deny, here are the case laws you need to be aware of. These are the standards of review you need to keep in mind. In order to protect due process, you got to do X, Y, and Z. So
is that what you said in the message?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
Why did you do that?
Because I resisted. It was my legal way internally to challenge a directive which was wrong.
How did you feel? Were you scared to do that? Did it feel like a little strange?
You don't know me. No, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I was angry. I was angry that we were being manipulated.
Jennifer Durkin from New York didn't see it the way George did.
So I hadn't read it that way, but I do think others did. I was literally like, which memo?
Oh, really?
I chose to assume that, of course, I would be left with my judicial independence. And that was legal decision-making. And so to me, that I guess I had hoped and assumed that would be left untouched.
And for a minute there, that was exactly what happened. She would rule on something based on what she thought was right, which was mostly denying motions to dismiss from the government. And ICE respected that. They didn't pick up people from those cases, let them walk out. But then, all of a sudden, ICE changed their approach.
A couple of weeks later, it didn't matter if you denied them, the people were still being detained.
When did you notice? How did you notice that it was happening?
I want to say maybe somebody had been outside who knew I had denied a certain motion, whether it was a staff member or a security guard, and then saw them get detained and came back in and told me. They were like, didn't you deny that motion? And I said, yes. And they said they took him. And so I might have, at that point, I might have looked at Opla and I said, is everyone just being detained?
Opla, by the way, is what judges call the government attorney, Office of the Principal Legal Advisor.
And they said yes, to their knowledge. So
what'd you say to that?
There wasn't much I could say.
To be clear, ICE had the legal authority to detain any immigrant whose case was pending. They just rarely used it. But now that it was happening so regularly, that brought up an existential question. What is the point of the judge? Whether they granted the motions to dismiss, whether they denied them, it didn't seem to affect what happened to the people in their courtrooms either way.
I knew that my ruling mattered, and the way I handled the case legally matters. But in terms of the practical outcome, ICE was going to do what they were going to do regardless of my ruling.
Right. So that's got to be a strange feeling because it's like you're saying it matters, but it matters almost like in a very intellectual way, but not in a practical way.
Yes. It matters for purposes of appeal. It matters in terms of how that person might be able to seek redress in the future. But it doesn't matter in terms of me being able to influence one way or the other with whether someone's taken into custody. It was always very clear that I didn't have any influence over that.
Isn't that maddening though? Because it's not that, it's not like that you can influence whether or not somebody gets taken into custody, but you're literally saying this person is still in proceedings or under the protection of the court and they're getting picked up anyway.
It really just sort of felt like everything, like the walls were disintegrating around us. It felt like everything was falling apart.
We have a big, complicated immigration system designed to answer a pretty simple question. Who can stay and who can't? And up until now, most immigration judges felt and acted like they were part of the judicial branch of government, an independent branch that just interprets and applies the laws. But they're not technically. They're actually part of the executive branch within the Department of Justice. They work for the president. But till now, no administration has ever given them very direct orders about how to decide their cases. They weren't used to it, and they didn't like it. But the orders kept coming in the form of policy memos from their bosses at the Department of Justice. A lot of policy memos, actually, that would start to transform immigration court from the inside. Some targeted a problem that the Trump administration was blaming on Biden, the giant backlog of immigration cases on the books. Under President Biden, so many people entered the United States that the number of asylum cases exploded, which added to an existing backlog. The total is now more than 3.5 million pending immigration cases, with a comparatively tiny